Hello folks, welcome to another Broken Meeple review, and wait a minute, you already reviewed this one, right? Yeah, technically I did. This is a bit of a one-off video here. I don't tend to do expansions by themselves, I tend to do them in an anthology review. However, Shem Phillips from Garphill Games was kind enough to send me a prototype of the Age of Artisans expansion for Architects of the West Kingdom. And, it was requested that I could do a single video on this, so, it was a kind gesture, so I figured I'd do it on this one occasion. This is not something I'm trying to do on a regular basis, but, like I say, they sent me a copy, so I decided that this deserved enough prey to get it into a single review. So, bear in mind this is a prototype of the expansion, but it's due out any day now, and frankly, apart from the fact that the pieces were a bit bent and, some of the card backs were a little different, it pretty much felt like, oh, this is what it will look like when the actual game's released. So, it's not like I'm having to go, well, I can't comment on the component quality, because frankly, it's as good as what the original game looks like, in terms of its artwork and what it's going to feel like. So, what does this do? Well, first of all, spoiler alert, this game, yeah, check out my other review for that one. Suffice to say, I love it a lot. This is a worker placement game where you were trying to put your workers out and build up a cathedral and lots of different buildings. It was a fairly generic theme, but whether you were high and low virtue dictated what sort of actions you could do, but also you could hire apprentices with special powers, and the way the workers happened was that you put them out, the location was based on the power of the location was based on how many workers you had there, and then you never had any rounds. You never collected your workers back at the end of a round, which blows a lot of Euro players' minds off. Instead, you have to go to a different space and round them up, or other people round them up, and dump them in prison for money, and then you go to the prison and get them back. It's mind-blowing how it sort of takes worker placement and throws it on its head. Raiders of the North Sea was a similar deal where you put a worker down and take another worker back, and it's like, wow, I love these twists on worker placement. But like I say, this isn't a review about the game, check that video out. This is the expansion. People have been looking forward to this for a while. Sorry about the glare on the light, I can't help it, but essentially, what is this adding to the game that, you need? Do you consider this essential? Is this one that is a must-buy? Well, that's what I'm here to tell you. So what does it add? Well, it doesn't add a huge amount in terms of complexity, actually. There's a couple of new mechanics, and then there's just a little bit more variety. You, of course, get more apprentices. Great, more apprentices, always a good thing. You get another another player color, orange, so you can have 6 players playing this game. More on that later. But with that, you now get 2 more characters that you can pick for your starting setup that are based on expansion stuff. So I guarantee when you throw this expansion in the box, at least one person is going to be playing orange. But, it gives you another variety for characters. Now you've got, 12 different starting setups you can have, depending on which color you pick. And each color will have 2 different starting setups you can have, like with player powers and that. Great. I want more of those, please. Keep bringing them out because I like that sort of thing. So those are the easy things that it adds. But what are these new mechanics? Well, there's 2 main ones. There's one that's very straightforward, the Artisan. It's called the Age of Artisans at the end of the day. You expect them to be there. But surprisingly, Artisans aren't the biggest thing in this game. Kind of weird. It's called Age of Artisans, but the Artisan is quite a small element in this game. It's like an easy throw-in. It's kind of, I would say this isn't quite a modular expansion. I mean, you can't sort of go, right, I'll throw in these cards, but I won't throw in the Artisan. You kind of need to throw all of this into the game. But more on that a bit later in terms of how effective that is. The Artisan itself is a bigger meeple. When you place it out, it counts as 2. So you can get 2 resources for putting this one piece out. But at all other times, it counts as only 1 character. So, if somebody dumps it in prison, it's only worth 1 gold. If you round it up, it's just 1 meeple, that kind of thing. But you can also, if you don't want to use it for gaining 2 of something, you can place it on one of the bad spots like the tax stand in the black market and ignore the virtue loss. So it's got 2 different uses, but aside from that, it's another worker you have. It's just a case of, right, well, I've put this worker out. Is there a way that I can get him back quick so I can place him out again? Because there's no reason not to place him out if you have him, because it accelerates your game a bit. But of course, how often do you want to go grab him, and is anybody else going to round him up first? A lot of the effects in the game do stipulate that they can't round up artisans, however. but not every single one. You can go to the town centre and just happily go, ooh yeah, meeples, 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 and you're artisan, thank you very much. But certainly it's worth doing it, particularly if you're playing orange, because one of their player powers is the artisans were 3 instead of 2. Whew, that can be good. If you can use your artisan repeatedly, that is a sick power. But, you know, it's all situational. So the artisan is a pretty straightforward include. The meat of this expansion, though, is this new set of cards. They're called craft cards, and there's 2 elements to them. Basically, when you go to the Guildhall, it is now replaced by the separate board, a recess board, thank God. So where you've got to, you know, where you normally lay your meeples down, now it's a recess board that you put on top, and it's like, okay, it's a bit annoying you have to put it on top of a board, but it's recessed, which means the workers will actually stay there, which is about time. Although it adds another little complication to that. Basically, when you go to the Guildhall now, you can now build one of these craft cards. To build the craft card may or may not require money depending on which end you use. There's a top and a bottom element to them. Top are yellow, bottom red. The red, you slide underneath an apprentice to give it an additional bonus when you use that apprentice. So I might put it under the swindler, who gets me, I forget what they each do, but he gets me a wood every time I go to the back market. So now I put this craft bonus underneath him, and as well as a wood, he gets me a stone. Or he allows me to get somebody out of prison. Or he allows me to round up a group of meeples. Or he allows me to regain a virtue or something. So now when I take the swindler to the back market, I get a wood and the bonus. And you can only have 1 bonus under each under each apprentice, but you can have 5 apprentices, so you can technically have 5 cards. Pretty sweet going. You can create some nice combos with these. And this is probably my favourite aspect of the game. Being able to take the apprentices, which are already a cool way of deciding what's your strategy to victory, by creating the combos with the apprentices, now you can create even better combos and even more weirder combos with the various new apprentices plus all these red craft cards. The last game I played, I had I think it was an antagonist character. I don't think they're in the base game, I think they're in a new one. But they allow you to like round up a group of oh no, they count as an extra worker when you go to the town centre. On top of that, I slid a bonus underneath them, which allowed me to round up another group of meeples. So I was able to basically go to the town centre, and with this antagonist character, round up something like 3 or 4 groups of meeples for not a huge amount of money. It was pretty easy to do so. So I basically played the mass enforcer. I was just going around going, I'd collect up your meeples, I get a giant ton of cash, and then I'm set for ages. But it worked pretty well doing it though, because as well as doing that, I had another character who, when I dumped people in prison, not only did I get a gold for that person, but underneath that apprentice, I had a bonus that said that as well as getting the gold, I also was allowed to lose a virtue to get a marble. So suddenly I'm getting cool resources by dumping people in prison, which you normally couldn't before. It does allow you to create some cool, interesting combos. More strategies to victory have been opened up with these cards, and they don't cost anything to play, but you have to leave a worker there. And this is the thing with that recess board. It's nice that the first worker you place in there is nicely in the recess bit so it doesn't jiggle about, but in order to build one of these craft cards, you have to stack a worker on top of that worker. Now that's an interesting mechanic because you have to at least build something before you can start messing around with these cards, and you've only got so many slots to do it with. But then stacking a meeple on top of another meeple is obviously, even with the recess board, a recipe for things getting knocked around in that. So you kind of fixed one problem and then added a little other problem on top. It's not as bad as I'm making it out to be, but just bear in mind you might want to just be careful with this board. Now, that's only half of the card. The top half, the yellow bit, costs a lot of money. It costs you 5 money in order to do this, some of which is tax, but in this one, you slide them underneath the buildings, so the top part is showing. And what these do, these are a bit more generic. They give you more VP and an instant bonus. So they're nothing amazing in terms of like adding more variety to the game, because I think the red underside with the apprentices do a better job, but it does fix another little niggle that I had with the normal game. And I say, it's a niggle. But one problem with the original game is that by dumping people in prison and the tax stand and the silversmith himself, you could find yourself with too much money. You know, like, I've got all this money in the world, what do I do with it? And in the base set, you didn't have a lot of stuff that you could spend that money on, especially if you couldn't go to the black market. You know, I've got all the apprentices I need. Well, what else do I spend money on? Well, now you have something. 5 money, you can spend it on those yellow cards. So I've just dumped 12 people in prison and got 12 money, but I don't want any more apprentices. Fine, I'll go to the Guildhall, I'll stack a Meeple, I'll pay 5 money and I'll get this 4-point bonus on my thing as well as an extra gold for an instant bonus. It gives another purpose to money, because leaving money to the end of the game is a pointless endeavour. But of course, if you've got so much money and you've got nothing to spend it on, that's not particularly great either. So inadvertently, I don't know if this was intentional, but it does fix that little niggle I have with the base game of giving money another purpose. And of course, I like the fact that you can choose with a card. Do I want the yellow bonus on that or do I want the red? Because you can't have both. You got to pick one or the other. And of course, you need an apprentice to get the red card. You also need a building to get the yellow card. So if you're spending most of your time making the cathedral bigger, you're not able to do the yellow bit because you haven't got any building cards in front of you. So you got to mix and match a bit, or perhaps you just avoid the cathedral this game and decide, you know what, I'm just going with green cards. It opens up, again, some extra paths to victory. So that's pretty much all the expansion adds. You've got the extra meeple, you've got the crafting cards, the recessed board, and like I say, another colour with 2 things. You get a score pad, which is nice and useful because originally you didn't have a score pad, now you do, because the red, putting the stuff under the apprentices gives you some extra points, and the yellows are worth points. So the score pad is a nice addition. It's about time we had it. The recessed board is nice, but of course you're stacking meeple, so one problem fixed, another one earned. The black market second space is slightly expanded, so though as well as going to the middle black market space to get an apprentice for cheap, you can also go there and get any of the red craft cards without having to put a meeple there. So that's a nice addition. You know, you don't have to go to the Guildhall to get these red cards. And they're worth points at the end of the game based on the little reference aid you have. So that's essentially everything that's in it. A few new apprentices, a few new buildings, and a couple of really easy mechanics. And they are really easy. I have found that there is no reason not to teach this game with the expansion included. Now, I don't say that this is essential though. I don't think that this makes the game so much better that you can't enjoy it with the base set, because I already gave this game a 10, spoiler alert, with the base game on its own. This just basically makes it like 10 plus. You know, I love the game even more with this expansion included, so I still think it's a solid one that you should get. But no, if you didn't like Architects before, you're not going to suddenly change your mind with this thrown in. And, you know, and it's not like, oh, this fixes something that was totally broken with the original one. I mean, I mentioned about the money being more useful. It's nice, but it's not like it was broken in the original one. It just affected how you did your strategies. So now you've got a bit more flexibility, which is great. Again, not essential. But I certainly do think you need it, because I have taught this game to new players with this stuff added, and it's no more difficult. If you can understand the rest of the game, which isn't that complicated anyway for a worker placement Euro, you can easily understand this stuff. I mean, the Artisan. I can literally explain what the Artisan does in 30 seconds. It's a meeple that's worth 2, but only when you place it, and it can ignore virtue loss. Done. That's it. I don't need to teach anything else about this Artisan. You know, if somebody wants to round it up later, I can tell them whether it's legal or not based on the card they're using. So 30 seconds I've taught that extra rule. So all you've got is a new colour, whoopie-doo, they're all new anyway to that player. You've got the craft cards. Well, the new Apprentices and Buildings first, you just shuffle them into the decks and great, they're in there. Then they're more complicated than the originals, they just play on some expansion elements, okay, great. So the only new stuff you have to teach, really, that's of any significance, is those cards. But again, they're straightforward. You've already taught the Guildhall action, so you just teach the craft cards when you get to the Guildhall action. And it's not that difficult. I mean, what? You grab it and stick it under an apprentice, or you grab it, pay 5 money and stick it under a building. Easy. Job done. The only bit that might be fiddly to the player is to realise that they've got to stack it on top of a meeple, like their meeple on top of a meeple they've already done. Simple. It really is an expansion that you could throw into this game and teach new players without any trouble whatsoever. If there's one niggle with the expansion that I do have, is that it does allow you to play with 6 players. This game was too long when it had 5. It was too long with 5. I play it with 5 now and again, but I'm like, oh, I'm going to be here for a while. Even though turns can be quick, you feel like the game's dragging on a little bit, and it only takes 1 AP player to ruin it. So I don't like playing this with 5. I like it even less playing with 6.
I hate with.
You know, 6 is not a player count I want to play this with unless everybody knows the game. And even then, I'd be like, do we really need to play it with 6? I mean, there's a lot of stuff all over the board, and you've got to watch out for other players, but 6 is a lot of people to play this game with. But there is a new rule that does make this great. And, well, sorry, it makes the game quicker, but you could house rule it into the original game if you like. Raiders of the North Sea did this with their expansions. You can now hire an apprentice for free when the game starts. It's recommended as a 4 or 5 player game thing. It is like mandatory in a 6 player game. Personally, I'll throw it into every game, whatever player count. You essentially get to draft in reverse player order an apprentice from the 8 that are available and hire it for free. Great. I mean, how many turns has that just saved you? Not everybody can get an apprentice on their first turn, and certainly not that particular apprentice in the 4th column. So it could save you a good 2 turns of the game and just gets you that nice little push. It gives you that, like, you know what, I wanted my strategy to be based on this guy. Great, well, I've got him at the start. I can get going with that. Nice simple rule. You could house rule it into the base game, but perfect, it's there. So overall, this, as I said, not an essential expansion, but it is still a solid, like, I mean, I don't know what you would rate expansions these days. I think I could just rate it a 10. Easy enough. It does exactly what I want an expansion to do. Okay, 6 players don't care. That's a minor part of this. But what it does do, it adds more variety, more of the good stuff. More buildings, more apprentices. Great. Keep them coming. I want to see even more of them. Another player color with 2 extra player powers. Great. I want to see more of that. So more of the same, no complication. But then when it does add new mechanics with the artisan and the craft cards, they're not complicated. I can throw them into every game. I don't have to feel like, oh, wait a minute, I'm teaching 2 new players. All right, fine. All right, base game only then. No, I can throw this in with ease, even with new players, and that plus extra variety is what every good expansion should do for an already great game. So I can't wait to pick up a retail copy of this when it comes out. You know, I mean, like I say, I've got slightly bent stuff because it was a prototype version, but honestly, I think this is about as final as it's going to get, so I don't expect much, if anything, in the way of changes, apart from maybe just making certain the card backs are the same as the base set. Do not mess that up, guys. Alright, seriously, people will hound you for that if you get that wrong. But honestly, can't wait for it. I've already got it, so I'm just going to replace the pieces with, you know, what I've got in here, you know, a less bent board and that. But yeah, honestly, if you like Architects of the West Kingdom, there is no reason you shouldn't go out and grab this expansion, because it will make it into a 10+ game. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review. A fantastic game with a fantastic expansion. What more do you need? And remember, regardless of whether you've rounded up my guys and dumped them in prison against their will, it's still only a game. Take care, and I'll see you next time.